A deaf boy sat in silence his entire life. He had never heard a single sound. Not his mother's voice. Not thunder. Not his own name. Then a stranger passed through his village. And the stranger did something no healer, no priest, no doctor had ever done. He didn't heal the boy's ears. He learned the boy's silence. The boy who taught God to listen. His name was Eli. 8 years old. Deaf since birth. His village, a fishing settlement on the north shore of Galilee, treated him the way most villages treated the broken, with pity dressed as kindness. People spoke slowly around him, exaggerated their lips, patted his head, smiled that tight, helpless smile people give when they don't know what to do with someone who makes them feel uncomfortable. His mother, Miriam, was different. She had built a language for them. Not formal signs. Their own. Private. 8 years of invention, gestures, expressions, touches. A tap on the left shoulder, I'm here. 2 taps, I love you. Hand on the chest, I understand. Open palm held up, wait, I'm not finished. They could hold entire conversations without a sound. At the market. Walking the shore. In the dark before sleep. Miriam's hands and face were Eli's ears. But she couldn't be everywhere. And when she wasn't there, Eli was alone in a way hearing people cannot imagine. Silence is not the absence of sound. Silence is the absence of connection. When people around you laugh and you see their mouths open and their bodies shake but hear nothing, you're watching life through glass. When your mother sings you to sleep and you know she's singing because her chest vibrates against your back, but you've never heard a single note that's not quiet. That's exile. Jesus came through the village on a Thursday. The village emptied toward him. Fishermen dropped nets. Women left bread half kneaded. Children ran barefoot. Miriam grabbed Eli's hand and pushed through the crowd. She was desperate, not the managed, daily desperation she had learned to swallow. Something raw. Because for the first time in 8 years, there was a chance. They broke through. Jesus was sitting on an overturned boat, teaching. Miriam fell at his feet. My son. Deaf since birth. He's never heard a sound. Please. She couldn't finish. Jesus looked at her. Then at Eli. Eli stood behind his mother. He couldn't hear her crying, but he could see her shoulders shaking. He could see the crowd watching. He could see the man on the boat looking at him. And the man's eyes were different. Not the pity eyes. Not the poor boy eyes. These eyes were seeing him. Not his ears. Him. Jesus stood. Walked to Eli. Slowly. Knelt to eye level. And instead of reaching for the boy's ears, instead of placing hands on his head the way every healer had done, he raised his hands. And signed. Not Miriam's private language. Something simpler. Older. His hands moved deliberately, the gestures of someone crossing a bridge rather than shouting across the gap. Eli's eyes went wide. The stranger's hands were talking. Not perfectly. Humbly. The opposite of every hearing person who had ever shouted at Eli, as if volume could cross the divide. Eli looked at his mother. His face wasn't asking what's happening, it was asking who is this? Because no healer, no priest, No doctor had ever tried to speak Eli's language. They all tried to drag him into their world. This man was stepping into his. But not everyone was moved. Rabbi Gershom pushed through the crowd. He was the village's spiritual authority, a serious man, learned, protective of his people. He had seen healers come through before. He had seen the aftermath, the hope, the failure, the devastation that follows when a mother believes her child will be healed and the healer leaves and nothing has changed. Stop. The crowd parted. Gershom stood between Jesus and the boy. Every year someone passes through. Every year some mother brings her child. Every year promises are made. And every year I hold the pieces when the healer is gone and the child is still broken. He looked at Miriam. Not with cruelty, with the hard compassion of a man who had watched too many hopes shatter. Miriam, don't do this to yourself. Don't do this to Eli. Miriam flinched. Because Gershom wasn't wrong. She had done this before. 3 times. 3 healers. 3 promises. 3 mornings after where Eli woke up in the same silence and Miriam had to rebuild her acceptance from scratch. The 3rd time was the worst. A traveling Egyptian oils, incantations, an elaborate ceremony. He charged money they didn't have. Miriam sold her loom, her livelihood, to pay him. He chanted over Eli for an hour. Declared him healed. Left. Eli couldn't hear the door close behind him. Miriam had spent 6 months rebuilding after that. 6 months of Eli touching her face, signing when will the sound come, and Miriam having to sign back, it's not coming. I'm sorry. It's not coming. She had promised herself, never again. And now here she was. Again. On her knees before a stranger. Gershom's voice softened. Protect your son. Protect yourself. Miriam looked at Eli. He was watching the stranger. His face was open. Unguarded. The face of a child who has just seen something he recognizes but cannot name. And Miriam felt the old war ignite in her chest. Hope versus experience. Love versus protection. The mother who would do anything against the mother who had been burned 3 times. What if this time? It's never this time. It's always the same. Jesus hadn't spoken. He had watched the exchange, watched Gershom step between him and the boy, watched Miriam waver. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. He didn't proclaim his power. He looked at Gershom. You're right, he said. The rabbi blinked. You're right to protect them. Every healer who came before me took something from this family. Money. Hope. Dignity. You're standing where a good shepherd stands between the wolf and the sheep. Gershom stared. He had expected resistance. Offense. Not agreement. I'm not going to promise you anything, Jesus said. I'm not going to tell Miriam her son will hear today. I'm going to ask for one thing. What? 10 minutes. With the boy. Alone. If nothing changes, I'll leave. And I won't take anything with me. Gershom looked at Miriam. Miriam looked at Eli. Eli was looking at Jesus with an expression that settled it, the expression of a boy who had found something he didn't want to let go of. 10 minutes, Miriam whispered. Jesus took Eli away from the crowd. They walked down the shore, away from every watching eye. Just the two of them, the carpenter and the deaf boy, walking on stones beside water that Eli could see but not hear. They sat on a rock. The lake stretched before them. Jesus pointed at the water, then at his own ears, then made a motion waves. Have you ever heard this? Eli shook his head. Jesus pointed at a gull overhead, its mouth open in a cry. Eli shook his head. Jesus pointed at Miriam, distant now, a small figure on the shore. He mimicked a mouth moving, singing. Eli's lip trembled. He shook his head. He had never heard his mother's voice. Jesus was still, looking at the boy, and Eli watched something cross the stranger's face, not pity, something heavier. As if the man was taking the weight of 8 years of silence and placing it on his own back. Then Jesus did something Eli didn't expect. He put his fingers in his own ears, blocked them, pressed his palms flat against his head, closed his eyes. He sat in Eli's silence. The lake moved. The wind blew. The gull cried. And the man who could hear everything chose to hear nothing. He stayed there a long time. Longer than Eli expected. The boy watched the stranger's face and saw it change from concentration to discomfort to something that looked like pain. The stranger's jaw tightened. His breathing quickened. His shoulders curved inward. Being deaf for a few minutes is not the same as being deaf for a lifetime. Jesus knew this. But he was not performing empathy. He was paying a cost. Even a few minutes of chosen exile, cutting himself off from the wind, the water, the birds, the distant sounds of human life pressed against something deep in him. He who had spoken the world into existence was now sitting in a pocket of silence, feeling what it meant to be cut off from the sound of his own creation. When he opened his eyes, they were red. Not just wet. Red. The blood vessels broken by some internal pressure that Eli couldn't see. Eli was staring at him. Because in 8 years of life, no one, not one person had ever closed their ears. No one had ever said without words, I want to know what your world feels like. Everyone tried to fix him. No one tried to join him. Jesus removed his hands. He looked at the sky. And he sighed. Not a normal sigh, a sound that came from somewhere below his lungs. Below his chest. From a place where the grief of the world was stored, not just this boy's silence but all silence, all exile, every person who had ever been locked out of the room where life was happening. The sigh cost him. Eli saw it, saw the stranger's body contract, saw his hands grip the rock beneath them, saw the tendons in his neck stand taut. Whatever was happening inside this man was enormous, a pressure being released, or absorbed, or both. Then he reached toward Eli's ears. Slowly. Gently. Eli didn't flinch. The stranger had earned it. Not with power. With presence. Jesus touched the boy's ears. One finger in each. Light. The touch of someone who knew what he was touching, not broken organs but a locked door. He looked up. One more time. And said one word. Ephphatha. Be opened. The sound came like sunrise. First a hum. Low. The vibration of the world itself. the baseline of all sound that hearing people stopped noticing long ago. Eli's hands flew to his head. Not pain. Shock. Something was entering through channels sealed for 8 years. His eyes went huge. Then water. The lake. Small waves on stones. A rhythm he had watched his whole life and never heard. It sounded alive. Then wind. Not pressure wind, the wind he knew. Sound wind. It had a voice. A whisper. It moved through his hair and he could hear it. Then a bird. The gull. Sharp. Piercing. He jumped. His first surprise by noise. He stumbled. Jesus caught him. And then from 100 meters down the shore, Eli. His mother. Calling his name. The way she always called out of habit, even though he'd never once responded. His name. In her voice. The voice that had been singing against his back for 8 years, vibrations through ribs, through skin, never through air. Until now. He ran. Not toward Jesus. Toward her. Full speed. Stones under bare feet. Arms pumping. Miriam saw him coming. She didn't understand yet. She opened her arms. He hit her like a wave. Mama. The first word he ever spoke. Ugly. Malformed. A voice box unused for 8 years trying to produce a word it had never practiced. It sounded like a broken bell ringing for the first time. Miriam heard it. She grabbed his face. Both hands. Eli, can you hear me? Nodding. Crying. His hands on her mouth, feeling the vibrations he'd always felt but now hearing them. Say my name, he signed. Their language. Say it again. Eli. He closed his eyes. Let it enter him. Again. Eli. Again. Eli. 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 She was laughing and weeping and saying his name, and he was hearing it each time new, each repetition a universe, and the crowd was gathering now, seeing the deaf boy listening to his mother's voice. Gershom was there. The rabbi who had tried to protect them. Who had said it's always the same. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, watching the boy who couldn't hear touching his mother's face and crying, and Gershom's legs failed him. He sat down in the dirt. Not gracefully. The way a man sits when the foundation he's been standing on shifts. He put his face in his hands. And the protector, the man who had built a wall around this family to keep hope from hurting them again, wept. Because he was wrong. And being wrong had never felt so much like mercy. That evening, Miriam found Jesus. He was alone by the water, watching the sunset. She sat beside him. For a long time, nothing. Then, you could have healed him immediately. In the crowd. Yes. Why didn't you? Because he didn't need a miracle first. He needed to be understood. Silence. Everyone who tried to help Eli tried to fix him. As if his silence was the problem. As if he was broken. Wasn't he? His ears were broken. He was not. Your son built a world in that silence. A language. A way of seeing. He reads faces the way scholars read Torah. He feels music through his body. He knew you sang to him every night, not because he heard you but because your ribs vibrated against his back. Miriam's hand went to her mouth. Before I opened the door to sound, I needed him to know I saw his world. That I wasn't destroying his silence. I was adding to it. He looked at her. He didn't lose anything today. He gained. Miriam was quiet a long time. He said, "Mama." His first word. I know. He could have listened to anything. The water. The birds. The wind. The first sounds of his life. But the first thing he did was run toward my voice. Jesus smiled. Out of every sound in the world he chose yours. Eli never forgot the silence. He heard everything now. Rain. Fire. His mother's singing, which was, he discovered, slightly off-key. He loved it more than any perfect melody. But some nights he covered his ears with his hands. The way the stranger had done. And he sat in the quiet. His first home. The place where he had learned to see. And in the silence he remembered the man who entered it with him. Who closed his own ears and sat in the exile. Who sighed from a place deeper than lungs. Who paid something visible, something physical, something that left his eyes bloodshot and his hands shaking before speaking the word that opened everything. The fire is out. But on a lake shore, a boy is running. Bare feet on stones. Toward a voice he waited 8 years to hear. And behind him on a rock, watching a man who could hear everything once chose to hear nothing. He closed his ears first. Then he said, "Be opened." And everything changed. Shall we continue?